a lot of inputs made this happen. That when I used to give talks on educational technology, I would often start by this slide, with this slide. So 2001, I had a sabbatical from University of Washington. I had the opportunity to join the Learning Science Technology group here at Microsoft in Redmond in a distributed classroom project, so you can load a .ppt. But it is the type of very, I was actually been frustrated that some of the ideas haven't been, and I thought you'd keep some of it in the context of the slide and you would make more space. Any reaction into the presentation. And I'm very, very proud of what the mechanism eventually turned into. And there were a lot of internal. I give an example of a graph, and ask the students to number the nodes in topological order. Presenter. So one of the things that we recognized quite early about Classroom Presenter is that we were actually going against the grain in a lot of the discussions of education and pedagogy. And it's doing something basically reactionary. So I've been to many education conferences and sat through big talks presented in PowerPoint about how awful lectures are as a pedagogical approach, and proposing flipped classrooms and many, many learner-centered approaches of dismissing the lecture as just being a outmoded, evil, useless, reactionary plot. Yet, lectures have quite a bit of resilience. And so we were really trying to make the lectures better. So thinking about how do we improve the lecture, and our view was improving the lecture, give the instructor more flexibility during the class, give the instructor structured ways of interacting with students. And so really thinking about how to improve the slide-based lecture. Another thing that put us with odds with a lot of people is we really did embrace PowerPoint as a tool and think about the really important positive aspects of PowerPoint and slide-based lectures. And in particular, PowerPoint is very significant because it provides a structured representation of a lecture, something that can be refined and iterated. And we're very excited about thinking about how do we put better content and better mechanisms for presentation in an educational setting into PowerPoint, and really viewing the slide artifact as a significant representation of educational content. So there were, of course, many challenges in the Classroom Presenter project, and challenges that led to, you might or might not get everything to everybody by the end of the hour. And so it was, just this challenge of how do you get the bits to everybody, and spent a long time. We used multicast, where instead of sending one at a time to people with error correction, you would send the bits simultaneously to everybody. But in the wireless environment, some slides, some data would be lost. So slides would appear at different periodicities to people, and they would have this kind of blank slide that eventually content might or might not appear. The frustrating thing was just how much time we spent on this, and I guess this is kind of an example of a problem. If you wait long enough, it goes away. That for the robust versions of Classroom Presenter 3, it was just setting up point-to-point communication between the instructor's machine and each of the students too. So individually sending the slides to each student worked out. Another have to be recognized about using something like Classroom Presenter in the classroom. And one is just this issue of cognitive load while lecturing. That it's well known that your IQ drops by 50% when standing up in front of people. and just kind of the simple affordances such as keeping track of what color the ink is on the pen and the slides. Now I've seen interesting things such as people who have one slide which will be, let's say, dark blue background, and so they've chosen a yellow to be writing on. Advance to the next slide, which actually has a white background, and keep writing on yellow. And yellow on white is not the best inking style. And I've seen this go on for kind of multiple slides before it's observed or noticed. And so just the cognitive issues that I think we've been quite successful in, having the big colored buttons and simple interface, but complicated things to do in an interface while lecturing are dangerous. Another thing that I've found to be really tragic is watching some people give a lecture from a tablet PC, and the lecture is given like this, with heads down facing the tablet, and so focusing on the writing, no eye contact. And I felt really guilty when I've watched people who sacrifice the audience interaction to just focus on the heads down writing.
But compare that to standing at a whiteboard or a blackboard with your back to the class.
Yes, I certainly had instructors who I didn't see their eyes for 3 long proofs, yes. Yes, a point taken, thanks. Another lecture environment challenge is there's often this picture of some guy in a nice suit lecturing in front of a large lecture, holding a tablet PC, kind of writing neatly on the slides as he's walking across the audience. That, I'm often kind of shaky enough and nervous enough in class that the last thing I want to be doing is holding my laptop and just the fear of dropping it. So kind of the physical affordances are certainly an issue that come up. That in the course of Classroom Presenter, that we did lots of different things with the tool. Though one of the things that was really fun was spent a tremendous amount of time just studying the ink people wrote on slides. And I've watched many, many lectures that in our master's program we would record our lectures, so I would have both the lecture as well as the ink and stepping through them. That one of the key things about how people use ink in class is it's integrated into the slides. That often if you see the ink and the slides and weren't there, what are church booleans? That during the lecture, the ink is very important for identifying where the attention is, making key points, emphasizing points, but it is a very transitory experience. That we did a lot of analysis of diagrams done in lecture, and very often a diagram would have a series of phases. So draw a little, make a point, draw more, make a point. And so we started to experiment with ways of representing this, and if you're going to show an archive of the ink, I've come up with appropriate snapshots of when the inking, when the different pictures occur. That it actually seemed to be quite easy, just based on timing, to figure out how to phase and draw the diagram. You know, we spent lots of time understanding how different tick marks were used and for where things are, sometimes kind of linking to show things are connected and have this theory of different annotation marks. Another thing that is going to shock nobody, but there are a lot of mistakes on slides. And so just looking at the Ink in Classroom Presenter and seeing where people correct mistakes on their slides, and seeing the number of these, that I thought a very useful tool and for an instructor would be just something that would allow the instructor to quickly review the slides after lecture to then make updates to the slides for the next time the course was offered. That I think it's a good bet for all 6 of these mistakes. Next time the course is offered, they're going to be there again. And so thinking about how the inking can actually feed back into instructor review. Another kind of cool plaything that we did is experimented with different varieties of digital ink. That we never put these into the production versions of Classroom Presenter. Here's an ink that Craig Prince developed that allowed an illustration of how fast the pen was moving. Here's an effect that Craig developed, which allows you to see overlap and layering of the ink, just with a simple trick of having the main solid ink with a slight border. And it's actually an effect you see in on the chalkboard, where you can see drawing new chalk on top of old chalk. That another boundary case that wasn't that important but was fun to play with was that if you're having multiple people write from different tablets, displaying them on a common screen, how do you overlap the ink? So if I'm drawing with a red pen, Jonathan is drawing with a blue pen, that we're drawing at the same time and trying to overlap them appropriately. And there are just funny things come up if you start. It's natural to draw ink in layers. So it's whatever layer is drawn on top wins. And so how do you get shared inking to do the right thing? Okay, so for Classroom Presenter, it was developed at University of Washington over quite a few years. Started with work at Microsoft, large number, very exciting work in Classroom Presenter. We were doing a lot of interesting things. Kind of my one sentence description of kind of why I moved on was difficulty of continuing to do this work as part of a research enterprise. And one of the things that's been great about Classroom Presenter is a tablet, slide deck style lecture, rich features to lecture with digital ink. But then all the students would have a range of personally owned wireless devices where they could interact with the lecture in different ways. But when we did the work around student submissions, that we had this cart of HP tablets. We would take them to class early, get all the slides transferred to the tablets, pass out the tablets. Students would do 1 or 2 or 3 exercises during class using these special tablets on their desktops. But that was not sustainable at all. That it was good for experimentation, but certainly not the overhead. That some schools had a mandate of uniform devices for all students, which maybe could make it work. But we really felt that, you know, the way it's going to work is that if people have these devices that they want to keep charged because they really want to be texting to their friends, and incidentally they can use them for participating in the class. So we really wanted it to be based on student devices. We wanted the devices to be ubiquitous. We didn't want to have a single device used. We wanted to have a situation where we could count on content being distributed across the class seamlessly. And you know, that was kind of a crazy vision in 2003, but absolutely feasible right now. So there's kind of the irony that, you know, the vision for Classroom Presenter could be